All right, guys, Monty here, retired lawyer, active father, and today we're going to be talking about the fourth trimester, an idea that I've been referring and alluding to from the beginning. And it's a profoundly important one. If you can understand the idea behind the fourth trimester, it'll go a long way towards understanding how to care for a newborn in its entirety. And I didn't come up with the term. It was coined or invented, I believe, by a pediatrician named Harvey Karp, whom you may have heard of. And if he didn't come up with it, he's at least popularized the term. And what the fourth trimester refers to, basically, is the idea from a biological or evolutionary standpoint that your baby and my baby and human babies in general are born essentially a trimester too early. Trimesters, you know, traditionally they refer to the trimesters of a pregnancy, first, second, third trimester, right? Well, the fourth trimester is about the idea that unlike other mammals in the animal kingdom who are able to walk or even run or damn near fend for themselves almost from day one or within hours or days of their birth, human babies are born and they're basically defenseless at first, and it seems like they're not really quite ready for the world, and that they need a transition period to help them get from the womb to our world. What doctors and scientists theorize, or maybe more than just theorize, the idea is that our brains and our skulls are getting too big to fit through the birth canal, which is a good thing for the species because it's our big brains and skulls that got us here, right? But it's not good for the birthing process. So they're kind of, shunted from the womb earlier than they're ready for. What that means is that the more you can make your baby's transition from the womb to the real world comfortable and easy for him, the happier of a newborn you'll have and the less crying you will experience. Let's think about what a baby's life is like in the womb for a minute or two. In the womb, in mom's uterus, a baby never knows what it's like to feel hungry because there's a continuous IV-like drip of nutrients and food coming to it from the umbilical cord. A baby's never gassy and needs to be burped inside of the womb because it's never nursing at mom's breast and sucking in air bubbles that cause it discomfort that it doesn't understand, and so it cries. It never is pooping on itself or, feeling the discomfort of a soiled diaper. It's never tired, or at least not overtired, because its existence is just the continuous ebb and flow of sleep and wakefulness, however they do it. But I'm pretty sure they're not, getting exhausted or overly fatigued in there. A baby in the womb doesn't know what it's like to feel too hot or too cold, or to be hurt, or to be sick. None of these things. Also, a baby in the womb is tucked into this very kind of close and confined but cozy space. It's accustomed to having its arms and legs folded over onto themselves and to be tucked in there nice and cozy until it's getting too big and it has to, leave the womb and out of the world. But that's how it's gotten accustomed to living. It is used to kind of swaying or at least bobbing around as mom carries on the activities of her day and walks around the house or the office. It's used to being in a for the most part, traditional pregnancies in a kind of downward, sideways position where its head is toward the facing the birth canal, and that's how they come into this world head first. So they're actually kind of suspended, somewhat upside down in mama's tummy, um, and they are used to a environment in the womb that is fairly noisy. The flow of blood and heartbeats and whatever other sounds there are in there. It's look it up. It turns out it's actually kind of loud in there, but it's these kind of consistent or constant rhythmic sounds and noises that just become familiar to it in the womb. Now consider that, when he's born, he's thrust into this world and he begins to feel hunger for the first time. He gets tired. He is not in a cozy, confined space, but everything is kind of loose and free. And he's even got these appendages flying around that, baby doesn't even know what its arms and limbs are. He doesn't know that they belong to him even. So successfully, getting through the fourth trimester is all about mimicking the conditions that were present in the womb to try to roll out the red carpet for your baby and help them get accustomed to our world. You should Google Dr. Harvey Karp and the 5 S's. We're going to talk about the 5 S's, which are Dr. Karp's techniques for soothing a baby. And I'll touch on them in a minute, but the idea behind all of it is just to understand where the baby has come from and to help get it habituated to our world by recreating or mimicking the conditions that were present in the womb. So, for example, if a baby's hungry, it should be fed. If it's gassy, it should be burped, during and after the feeding if you need to. Obviously, if it's got a wet or soiled diaper, you ought to change it. So when you're meeting its basic needs as promptly or as quickly as you possibly can, you're going to have less crying, because it's not the case. It is just not true that babies just cry and that's just what they do, and you got to get used to it on a level. Crying is unavoidable because it's your baby's only means of communicating with you, but it's not the case that they cry for no reason. There's always a reason, and they're always trying to tell you something. So let's say you checked off all those boxes. Baby's not hungry, you just woke up and got a full feeding. Baby's not gassy because we've been burping it, and we know doesn't have any more burps. Baby's not we've changed the diapers, so it's got a clean bottom, and it's not tired because it just woke up from a nap. If your baby is still crying, then try Dr. Karp's 5 S's. The 5 S's stand for 5 words that begin with the letter S that help to soothe a newborn baby by recreating the conditions of the womb. No particular order. The 5 S's are swaddling. The reason why swaddling is so important isn't because it's just fun to be wrapped like a burrito and, it's just a happenstance or accidental that babies just like it. They like it for a reason, because it makes them feel like they're in the womb again. A newborn baby in the first trimester, doesn't want its arms and legs and, things flailing around. I remember when our son was a month old, we laid him down in the bassinet, and it was Halloween, so he was dressed up in a pumpkin type Halloween costume, and he was passed out. He was napping. He wasn't awake. But because he was in the Halloween costume, we hadn't swaddled him, and he woke up from his nap just, despondent. I mean, completely just crying, just despairingly. And it was because he'd freaked himself out when his arms were flailing around. He's probably wondering, what are these things and who do they belong to? And he didn't know it was actually his own arms and hands. I mean, it's something that he would learn in due time. But swaddling is important for that reason. Swaying or swinging gently, swinging or swaying, never shaking, but the gentle swaying motion or rocking a baby. The reason why it's soothing isn't just because humans have done it for thousands of years. Unbeknownst to us, it turns out, and I believe, it's because, that's how it was living in the womb. It was gently bobbing around as mom was going about her business during the day. And it often slept that way. Sometimes mom is awake and the baby in her tummy is asleep, and sometimes she's asleep and the baby's awake. But baby in the womb, they often fall asleep if there's some gentle swaying and bobbing motion, or at least they're familiar with that. So that's the second S. The third S is a sideways position or a stomach position. Newborns should never sleep on their stomach, but in the womb, if you can imagine, and if you see pictures of it, babies are positioned head down toward the birth canal, kind of in a sideways position, almost at a decline, or really at a decline, facing kind of downward. So try it, when your baby is born and you're trying to soothe them. You swaddle the baby and then you hold him in your hands. Try to turn him kind of sideways or even on its tummy, and even have it kind of decline so that its head is a little bit down. It might feel like you may not be comfortable in that position, but give it a shot. And in combination with the other S's, you'll see that it helps soothe a newborn baby, because that's the position and the posture that it's familiar with from the womb. Shushing a baby, right up against this ear, even louder than you might think you need to. Obviously not so loud that you're going to blow out an eardrum, but shushing in its ear helps soothe the baby because of the noisy environment it's accustomed to in the womb. And it tends to resemble kind of the same constant rhythmic sounds. I remember when my son was like 2 months old, and we'd been practicing the 5 S's throughout, but one day he was just kind of momentarily fussy, and he was sitting upright, and I just in his ear, immediately calmed down. The 5th S is sucking, which is a primary reflex and self-soothing reflex. Don't know as I sit here if babies are necessarily sucking their thumbs in the womb, but we all know as human beings that there's a real calming influence that comes from just sucking on its thumb, sucking on a pacifier, sucking on your clean thumb when you're cradling it in your arms. So those are the 5 S's: swaddling, swaying, sideways or stomach position, shushing, and sucking. Just a quick word about the sucking. I mentioned this in the last video. Do not introduce pacifiers or bottles at least for the first 6 weeks after your baby's born, because you're trying to get the breastfeeding to take hold. So in my opinion, it would be a mistake to introduce a pacifier during that time. Have him suck on your own clean fingers if you want. Later on, he can suck his own thumb, and later on you can introduce the pacifier, but don't do it at first. But that's the 5th S. And so, take a look at Dr. Karp's videos for yourself. It's another man that's brilliant, and he's come up with something extraordinarily brilliant to help us understand newborns. And I probably should have given him a big shout out in the first video when I was talking about the books we read and the authors we'd listened to. I didn't read Dr. Karp's book, a very popular book called The Happiest Baby on the Block. Feel free to check it out. I just didn't read it, but I know that the man was spot on when it comes to the 5 S's, and just a wonderful service to all humankind to help us understand newborns that way. So the key to the 4th trimester is meeting your baby's basic needs as promptly as possible, and then helping soothe them if their needs are met and they're still seemingly bothered or distraught by something, soothing them and helping soothe them by doing the kinds of things that remind them of the womb, and communicate to them that, hey, you're not far from where you were, but you're in a safe place. You're with mommy and daddy who love you, and everything's going to be all right. I will tell you, in our experience, the 5S's never failed to soothe our son. Sometimes it took all 5S's. It took him being swaddled, swayed in a sideways or stomach position, sucking my thumb and being shushed in its ear. But he would always calm down and be soothed by the 5S's. I will just briefly touch on the 3 topics that I'm going to cover in the next 3 videos, because this video is an overview of the 4th trimester. The next video will address the 4th trimester and breastfeeding specifically. So food. The video after that will address the 4th trimester and sleeping through the night. So sleep. And the video after that will talk about communication in the 4th trimester, which is basically crying. And we'll talk more about the 5S's, and I will give you tips for how to troubleshoot your baby, understand the differences among the types of cries that it does, and how to reduce the crying as much as you can. Because again, it's never the case that a baby cries for no reason. They're always trying to tell you something. I will just say for now that when it comes to food, I mean, the choice in the 4th trimester is either breast milk or formula. I urge you to do everything you can to support the mission of breastfeeding your baby. If it is just entirely impossible, that's okay. Many of us were formula fed as babies, and we all turned out okay. It doesn't mean your kid won't grow up to be healthy and happy and successful, at least as much as any other human walking around. But I have to tell you that unequivocally the choice is clear about which is superior, and the doctors and healthcare providers will tell you that breast is best, and that the optimal food that God and nature have designed for our human babies is mother's breast milk. I was reading an internet comment the other day where the person was saying, well, you know, look, me and my siblings, we were breastfed for only 6 weeks, and then we were all formula fed after that, and look at us, we turned out all right. And it's like, sure. But I will say, look, even the difference between 6 weeks of breastfeeding and 0 weeks of breastfeeding, I think, is profound. And we'll talk about all the myriad benefits of breastfeeding in the next video. I've talked about it a little bit along the way, but I would urge anybody out there who's listening to commit to breastfeeding, learn as much as you can about breastfeeding so that you can help the mother of your child breastfeed. Be there when the breastfeeding takes place so you can support the effort. And try to breastfeed your baby for at least the first 6 months exclusively, definitely for the first 4 months exclusively. The American Academy of Pediatrics, or AAP, recommends exclusive breastfeeding for the first 6 months, and breastfeeding at least as part of the regimen for the first year. I believe that their advice, or medical advice, the earliest you can introduce solid foods is after 4 months, which is what my wife and I did. We began introducing the most simple solid foods in the 5th month, but it was still predominantly breastfeeding for the first 6 months, and we continued with the breastfeeding for the first year according to AAP's guideline or recommendation, and I would encourage you to do the same. Breastfeeding is always on tap. Breastfeeding is always clean. It's kind of filtered by the mother's body in these ways that maybe I don't quite understand, but you know, it insulates the baby from even toxins that may be present in the mother's body. They don't always transfer to mother's breast milk because mom's body is prioritizing the breast milk even above her own physiological needs. It's incredible, but I mean, look this up. It's true. You know, if a woman is starving and is calorie deficient, her body will still make the breast milk, even to her own detriment, because it's prioritizing, the survival of the species over the mother's own health. And it's quite beautiful if you think about it in a certain way, that mom's body does that. Um, so continue to think long and hard about breastfeeding and prepare for it. Sleep. In the fourth trimester, newborns need to sleep all the time. They just need to sleep all the time. Optimal naps are in the neighborhood of an hour and a half, 90 minutes. I said in the last video that a 45-minute nap may be sufficient, but I didn't complete my thought, which is to say that ordinarily it is insufficient. It doesn't mean that all is lost if your baby's napping for 45 minutes for one nap or another. Maybe they get up early because they're just hungry and or they're experiencing a growth spurt. So during that growth spurt, the feedings will be closer to 2 hours apart than 2.5 or 3 hours apart. Maybe that's just how that cycle plays out, and they're going to get up after 45 minutes and they're not going to go back down until it's time for the next nap. But generally speaking, the nap should be about an hour and a half long, or at least an hour to an hour and a half long. Even in the first week for our son, we were seeing naps of 1.75 hours, or even 2 hours if the last nap was especially short, 40 to 45 minutes, or even less than that. Then the next nap might be longer than an hour and a half to make up for that, but you have to give your baby the opportunity to sleep, and you have to try to batten down the hatches and simplify your life and keep things organized and relatively calm, so that it can nap well. We'll talk more about sleeping in the fourth trimester in the video after next, but just understand again that newborns need to sleep essentially around the clock, something like 15 and 19 hours a day. Basically, when they're not feeding, nursing, breastfeeding, they should be sleeping, and their wake time in the beginning is essentially coextensive. It's the same as their feeding time. Communications we'll talk about in the video after next, but it basically means crying, because that's almost exclusively the only means of communication your baby's going to have. They don't have any other way to communicate with you other than crying. So it's never personal. It's never anything that there's a thought process behind, certainly no ulterior motives. You cannot spoil a newborn baby because they just don't understand the world that way, and they're not operating on that level. They're crying to try to tell you something, and the sooner you meet that need, they will stop crying. And the more promptly you can meet their needs in the fourth trimester and in the first year of life, more or less, they'll be calmer, happier, healthier babies who are understanding on kind of a subliminal level that, oh no, this is a safe place, and when I need mommy and daddy, they're there. And when I'm hungry or have other needs that need to be met, they take care of that. And it brings them a lot of comfort and security. I want to read to you an email that we had sent out. We've sent out to many friends and family members when they've had their firstborn. After our son was born, we've sent an email out to a lot of people we care about, and I just want to read that email to you because it really captures and summarizes some of the things I've been saying and my thoughts overall about the fourth trimester, giving you an overview of what the fourth trimester is about. So, dear friend, what a blessing. We can't wait to celebrate the birth of your baby. Feel free to ask us anything. You will decide what's best for you, but this is one of our favorite things to talk about, and we like to share what's worked for us with the people we love and care about. When we took our baby home, we gravitated toward a stable routine as soon as we could. Of course, keep in mind that the sample schedules we've attached to this email are just outlines. They're not set in stone. The goal isn't to follow them to the letter, but to use them as a guide. For the first couple of weeks especially, you don't want to be a slave to rigid structure, but you do want your baby to get 8 to 10 good feedings a day to regain his birth weight. And you simply must understand that he only has a short window of time in which to feed and be awake, but not really, until it's time to sleep again. The truth is that in the beginning, babies should spend almost all of their time sleeping when they're not feeding. So it behooves you to stick to a 2.5 to 3 hour cycle in which he feeds upon waking, then spends a few minutes awake as you burp him, finish the feeding, change his diaper, or talk or sing to him briefly, before being swaddled and put back down. This is what one of our books refers to as the FWS cycle, the feed, wake, sleep cycle. Just as an aside, feed, wake, sleep comes from BabyWise. The Secrets of a Baby Whisperer book refers to that cycle by another acronym, EASY. Eating, awake time, sleep time, and then your time. The idea being that when the baby goes down for a nap, that's when you have your time. My advice, use your time to sleep yourself. Have mom take naps when the baby's napping. That's what your time should be, but maybe it's taking a shower, maybe it's getting a bite to eat, but that's when your time takes place. So feed, wake, sleep, and then your time. Eat, awake, sleep, and then your time, not during. We'd like to emphasize something here because we've seen it for ourselves and believe in it deeply. It's never too soon to at least work toward a good schedule. Babies really benefit from this kind of stability and structure, and so will you. In fact, babies crave it, and they derive comfort from knowing what to expect next. Indeed, we all do, and the whole human body works better this way. Keeping to a schedule will not only help your baby get full feedings and good sleep, but also help mom get as much rest as possible, which won't be enough anyway. It will help reduce the chaos in everyone's lives. It'll make everything better. About crying. Remember that if you keep a good regular routine, you can usually eliminate some of the possibilities quickly so you can figure out what's wrong. For example, if your baby just woke up from a good nap and got a full feeding during which he was burped, then you don't have to worry about those things. Instead, you might change her diaper, and if she's still fussing, you can ask yourself if she's hot or cold or something else is wrong. I'll say it again. A good schedule helps immensely with the troubleshooting. Contrary to popular belief, babies do not cry for no reason. They're trying to tell you something, and the order usually goes as follows if you're on schedule. Hungry, gassy, during and or after the feeding. Wet or poopy, during and or after the feeding. Tired / sleepy, not long after the feeding. And then everything else that it could possibly be. Is he hot? Is he cold? Is he hurt? Is he sick? Is it too loud? Is it too quiet? Etc. Now, it's true that you can do all of the above and your baby may still be crying, but it's still not for no reason. Read the article below that I attached to the email or linked to the email by the pediatrician who came up with this method, or at least popularized it. He explains the notion of the fourth trimester, and it's brilliant. The notion is that we're all born a little earlier than we should be, ideally, because our heads are getting too big to fit through the birth canal. We're thrust into this world suddenly, and really, we're wondering what the hell is going on. Soothing a newborn, then, has a lot to do with mimicking the environment inside the womb. With our baby, it would sometimes take all 5 steps of the 5 S's, but it never failed to soothe him in the end. And sure enough, right around the 3 to 4 month mark, our son stopped needing or wanting things like his swaddle or the shushing in his ear. And then I linked to the article, which was at www.happiestbaby.com, which I believe is Dr. Karp's website, and you should check it out. I can't speak to all of his advice and recommendations, but as far as the 5S's goes, you ought to check them out. You'll be very glad you did. I will just leave you with a final word about the fourth trimester and the notion of schedules. The notion of schedules is not a good one if by schedule we mean that the baby nurses at 7 a.m. and then at 10 a.m. and then at 1 a.m. and 4 a.m. every 3 hours, no matter what. And we run that schedule in our household and we don't deviate from it no matter what. So if the baby's hungry before then, he just has to wait. If it's not nap time at the appointed time, then we're not going down, and we're just a slave to this schedule that we're looking at specific hours of the clock and demanding or insisting that the baby and life organize itself around that schedule. That's a mistake. It's silly and it doesn't make any sense because the baby doesn't care about our clocks and it's operating according to its own biological rhythms. You're not going to be successful trying to do that. But the notion of schedules is profoundly important if by schedule we mean getting the baby 8 to 10 good feedings a day based on a 2.5 to 3 hour cycle measured from the start of the first feeding to the start of the next feeding, and that we use the clock as a tool to see when it's time to feed and when it's time to nap. So it's not about a schedule per se, it's about stability and structure, which is what your baby wants and needs. As always, feel free to let me know if you have any questions, and I'll look forward to talking to you more about the fourth trimester in the days to come. Take care and see you next time.